Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the envelope, her name written in elegant script that matched her own handwriting perfectly. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her mother's terror. She dropped the letter like it had burned her, watching it flutter to the concrete floor among the scattered contents of the wooden box. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the metal roof with increasing urgency. The single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered, casting dancing shadows across the cramped storage unit. Maya pressed her back against a stack of cardboard boxes, her breathing shallow and rapid. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. She crouched down carefully, her pregnant belly making the movement clumsy, and picked up one of the other letters with 2 fingers. The envelope was addressed to Margaret Chen, 1247 S.W. Morrison Street, Portland, or... The postmark was dated 15 years ago. Maya's pulse hammered in her throat as she slid out the single sheet of paper inside. Dear Margaret, I'm sorry to be the bearer of such news, but you will pass away on November 15, 2008 at 3:47 p.m. A stroke, sudden and painless. Please know that your daughter Emma will find peace in the scholarship fund you've been secretly setting aside. Your love will outlive you. With deepest sympathy, Maya Rodriguez. The signature was unmistakably hers. The same loop on the Y, the same way she crossed her T's. But 15 years ago, Maya had been 13 years old, worried about algebra tests and whether Jake Morrison would notice her new haircut. She'd never heard of Margaret Chen. Maya's phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. She fumbled for it with shaking fingers, grateful for any distraction from the impossible letters scattered around her feet. Maya, where are you? The voice belonged to Jenna, her manager at the coffee shop downtown. Your shift started 20 minutes ago. Maya glanced at her phone's cracked screen. 2:20 p.m. Shit. She was supposed to work the coffee shop until 6, then head straight to her cleaning job at the medical building. The third job, weekend shifts at a call center, would start again tomorrow morning. I'm so sorry, Jenna. I had a family emergency. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I promise. Maya, this is the 3rd time this month. I know things are tight with the baby coming, but... Please, I can't lose this job. Not now. Maya's voice cracked. Between rent, groceries, and saving every penny for the baby, she needed all 3 paychecks to survive. Her ex-boyfriend Derek had vanished the moment she'd told him about the pregnancy, leaving her to face single motherhood alone. Jenna sighed. Just get here as fast as you can. And Maya? We need to talk soon about your maternity leave. You know we can't hold the position indefinitely. The call ended, leaving Maya alone with the letters and the sound of rain. She looked down at the envelope with tomorrow's date, the one addressed to her unborn daughter. Every instinct screamed at her to tear it open, to see what horror awaited. But another part of her, the part that had learned early that knowledge sometimes hurt more than ignorance, kept her hands frozen at her sides. Her grandmother Rosa had always been strange. Maya remembered whispered conversations that stopped when children entered the room, the way Rosa would touch people's hands and get that distant look in her dark eyes. Maya's mother had called it superstition, rolling her eyes whenever Rosa spoke about dreams and portents. But when Rosa disappeared without explanation when Maya was 8, her mother had packed up their small apartment within a week and moved them across town, as if running from something. Now Maya wondered what they'd been running from. She gathered up the letters carefully, her movements deliberate despite her shaking hands. There had to be dozens of them, maybe more, each one a death sentence delivered in her own handwriting to strangers she'd never met. The wooden box sat empty now, its carved surface depicting intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the flickering light. Maya ran her fingers over the engravings, spirals and symbols that felt familiar despite being foreign. The wood was warm, almost alive beneath her touch. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Jenna, probably threatening to fire her if she didn't show up soon. Maya stuffed the letters back into the box and tucked it under her arm. Whatever this was, family curse, genetic madness, or elaborate hoax, it would have to wait. Right now, she had a baby on the way and bills to pay. But as she locked the storage unit and hurried through the rain to her beat-up Honda Civic, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow's date was rushing toward her like a freight train, and somewhere in the back of her mind, her grandmother's voice whispered in Spanish, words Maya had never understood but had never been able to forget. Las mujeres de nuestra familia cargan con el peso del destino. The women of our family carry the weight of destiny. The Honda's engine coughed to life on the third try, belching exhaust into the grey afternoon air. Maya carefully placed the wooden box on the passenger seat, securing it with the seatbelt like it was something precious rather than terrifying. Her hands still shook as she gripped the steering wheel, and she had to take 3 deep breaths before backing out of the storage facility parking lot. Portland's rain had that relentless quality that soaked through everything. Clothes, bones, hope. Maya turned up the heat, though the ancient car's system barely managed lukewarm air. The baby shifted restlessly in her belly, pressing against her ribs with what felt like accusation. "You're supposed to protect me," the movement seemed to say. "And you're already failing." The coffee shop was downtown, a 20-minute drive that would cost her nearly a gallon of gas. Maya watched the fuel gauge hover dangerously close to empty and did the math in her head, a habit that had become as automatic as breathing. Rent was due in 6 days. She had $43 in checking and maybe 8 in tips from yesterday. If she worked every shift this week without calling in sick, she might make it. Maybe. The box beside her seemed to radiate heat through the seatbelt. Maya found herself glancing at it at every red light, half expecting it to burst into flames or whisper secrets. "Las mujeres de nuestra familia," her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, that musical cadence of Spanish that had always made her feel like she was missing something important. Maya pulled into the narrow alley behind Grind Coffee and parked beside the dumpster. The familiar smell of old coffee grounds and urban decay greeted her as she stepped out, cradling the box against her chest. She couldn't leave it in the car, not when it contained whatever impossible truth her grandmother had left behind. But she couldn't bring it inside either. She tucked the box behind the driver's seat and locked the car twice, testing the handle. Her paranoia felt both ridiculous and completely justified. "There you are." Jenna stood in the back doorway, arms crossed. At 35, she managed the coffee shop with the weary efficiency of someone who'd given up on bigger dreams. "You look terrible." Maya caught her reflection in the shop's window, pale, rain-soaked, dark circles under her eyes. At 28, she felt ancient. Family stuff. It's complicated. "Everything's complicated when you're broke and pregnant." Jenna's voice held more sympathy than irritation. "Come on. The afternoon rush is starting." Inside, the coffee shop buzzed with the familiar chaos Maya had come to depend on. Steam hissed from the espresso machine, laptops clicked with important urgency, and the steady stream of customers provided a rhythm that quieted her racing thoughts. This was her ordinary world, grinding coffee beans, calling out drink orders, wiping down tables with practiced efficiency. "Large vanilla latte with oat milk," Maya called out, sliding the cup across the counter to a woman in expensive yoga clothes. The customer didn't look up from her phone, didn't say thank you. Maya was invisible to her, just part of the machinery that produced caffeine. During the brief lull between the afternoon rush and the evening crowd, Maya sat in the back room and ate a day-old pastry that Jenna let her take for free. The baby kicked appreciatively at the sugar. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the solid reality of the life growing inside her. 6 months pregnant and alone. The father gone, her mother dead from cancer 2 years ago. No siblings, no extended family, except the ghost of a grandmother who'd left behind impossible letters written in Maya's own handwriting. The baby would arrive in 3 months, and Maya had managed to save exactly $217 toward the hospital bills. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ricardo, her supervisor at the cleaning company, building inspection tomorrow at Medical Plaza. "Need extra thorough job tonight. Can you stay late?" Maya typed back quickly. "Yes. How late?" "Until it's done." Time and a half after 10 p.m., she calculated quickly. If she stayed until midnight, the overtime would pay for groceries this week, but she'd have to be at the call center by 8 tomorrow morning, which meant 4 hours of sleep at most. The baby kicked again, weaker this time, as if protesting the schedule. "You okay?" Jenna appeared beside her with a concerned expression. "You've been somewhere else all afternoon." Maya wanted to tell her about the letters, about the impossible signatures and the dates that felt like threats. But how could she explain something she didn't understand herself? How could she say that her dead grandmother had somehow left behind predictions written in Maya's handwriting to strangers who might already be dead? Instead, she said, "Just tired. The baby's been keeping me awake." It was a safe lie, the kind pregnant women were expected to tell. Jenna nodded knowingly and returned to the front counter, leaving Maya alone with her fears and the pastry crumbs. Outside, rain continued to fall, and somewhere in her car, a wooden box held answers she wasn't ready for. Maya finished her shift at Grind Coffee in a haze muscle memory, carrying her through the closing routine, wiping down counters, stocking cups, emptying the tip jar that held exactly $4.37, barely enough for gas to get to her next job. The wooden box called to her from the car like a persistent headache, but she pushed the thought away. She had work to do. The medical plaza stood 15 stories tall against Portland's grey sky, its windows reflecting the city lights like vacant eyes. Maya parked in the service garage and gathered her cleaning supplies from the trunk, pointedly ignoring the box that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy in her peripheral vision. Ricardo met her at the service elevator, his weathered face creased with stress. "Inspections at 7 a.m. sharp," he said, handing her a clipboard thick with tasks. "Every floor, every surface. They find one speck of dust, we lose the contract." He paused, studying her pale face. "You sure you're up for this? You look—" "I'm fine." The lie came automatically. Maya needed the overtime more than she needed concern. The first 3 hours passed in a blur of disinfectant and repetitive motion. Maya worked her way up floor by floor, her swollen feet aching in shoes that no longer fit properly. The baby pressed against her bladder with increasing urgency, but bathroom breaks meant lost time, and lost time meant less money. It was nearly midnight when she reached the 7th floor, the cardiology wing. The hallway stretched before her, lined with office doors bearing doctors' names in gold lettering. Maya pushed her cart forward, the wheels squeaking in the silence. Dr. Patricia Williams, Dr. James Foster, Dr. Margaret Chen. Maya stopped so abruptly that her cart crashed into the wall. Her hands trembled as she stared at the nameplate, the letters swimming before her eyes. Margaret Chen, 1247 S.W. Morrison Street. The woman from the letter. The woman who was supposed to die 15 years ago. But here was her name, gleaming fresh on an office door in an active medical practice. Maya's legs gave out. She sank into a nearby chair, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward and graceless. Her mind reeled, trying to process the impossibility. Either the letter was wrong, which should have been a relief, or this was a different Margaret Chen. It had to be. Portland was full of Chens. It was a coincidence, nothing more. But even as she told herself this, Maya knew she was lying. She pulled out her phone with shaking fingers and typed Dr. Margaret Chen Cardiology Portland into the search engine. The results loaded slowly on the building's weak Wi-Fi, each second stretching like an eternity. The first result was an obituary from the Oregonian, dated November 16, 2008. Dr. Margaret Chen, beloved cardiologist and mother, passed away suddenly on November 15th at 3:47 p.m. following a stroke. She was 52. Dr. Chen was known for her dedication to her patients and her quiet philanthropy, including a scholarship fund for underprivileged medical students. Maya's phone clattered to the floor. The baby kicked hard as if sensing her mother's terror. November 15th, 2008, 3:47 p.m. Exactly as the letter had predicted, the letter written in Maya's own handwriting, signed with her own name, 15 years before she'd ever heard of Margaret Chen. The hallway suddenly felt too long, too empty, filled with shadows that moved independently of the fluorescent lights. Maya forced herself to stand, her legs unsteady. She had to get out of here, had to get back to the box, to the other letters. If Margaret Chen's death had come true exactly as predicted, what about the others? What about tomorrow's letter? Her hands shook as she gathered her cleaning supplies, abandoning any pretense of finishing the job. Ricardo would be furious, might fire her, but she couldn't stay in this building another minute, not with the ghost of Margaret Chen's nameplate watching her from the wall. The service elevator seemed to take forever. Maya clutched the rail, her knuckles white as the floors ticked by. Ground level, parking garage, freedom. But freedom felt like an illusion as she sat in her car, staring at the wooden box that had somehow orchestrated this moment. The rain drummed against the windshield with increased intensity, as if the sky itself was pressing her toward a decision. She could drive home, pretend tonight never happened, go to her morning shift at the call center, and continue the exhausting routine that was slowly killing her. The letters would remain unopened, their predictions unknown. Or she could face whatever truth her grandmother had left behind. Maya's hands hovered over the box, feeling the warmth radiating from the carved wood. The baby shifted restlessly, pressing against her ribs with what felt like urgency. Time was running out. Tomorrow's letter bore tomorrow's date, and dawn was only hours away. The choice stretched before her like a crossroads in the rain-soaked night, safety in ignorance or the terrible burden of knowledge. Maya took a deep breath and opened the box. The familiar scent of aged wood and lavender hit Maya like a physical blow, triggering memories she'd buried for 20 years. Her grandmother's bedroom, thick with incense and whispered prayers. Rosa's weathered hands tracing patterns in the air while speaking to shadows only she could see. Maya's fingers hovered over the letters, afraid to touch them again. In the dim light of the parking garage, they looked almost ordinary, just yellowed envelopes tied with string. But ordinary things didn't predict deaths with surgical precision. Ordinary things didn't bear her signature written in years when she was still a child. She picked up the envelope marked with tomorrow's date, her daughter's name written in flowing script across cream-colored paper. The weight of it seemed impossibly heavy, as if it contained not just words, but destiny itself. Don't open it. The thought came unbidden, in her mother's voice. Maria Rodriguez had spent her life running from Rosa's nonsense, as she called it. She'd forbidden Spanish in their house, thrown away the candles and herbs Rosa had given them, moved them across town when Rosa disappeared. That old woman filled her head with poison, Maya's mother had said whenever anyone asked about Rosa. Death follows her around like a lovesick dog. Maya's hands began to shake. She set the letter down as if it were radioactive. What if the predictions were real? What if tomorrow, today, now, since it was well past midnight, her daughter would die before even being born? What if opening the letter somehow triggered the event, like a curse activated by knowledge? But what if it didn't? What if the letter contained a warning she could act on? What if she could save her daughter by knowing how she might lose her? The baby kicked weakly, a flutter that felt different from before, smaller, fainter. Maya pressed her hand to her belly, panic rising in her throat. When was the last time she'd felt movement? An hour ago? 2 hours? She'd been so focused on work, on the cleaning, on Margaret Chen's nameplate that she hadn't paid attention. "Please be okay," she whispered. "Please." Her phone buzzed. A text from Ricardo, building inspector, called. "Moved inspection to Monday. You can finish tomorrow." Relief and terror warred in her chest. She wouldn't lose the job, but she also couldn't hide in work anymore. The letters demanded her attention with gravitational pull. Maya stared at her reflection in the car window, hollow-eyed, pale, looking every day of her 28 years and more. She thought about the life growing inside her, the child who would inherit whatever legacy Rosa had left behind. Would her daughter spend her life running from shadows and predictions? Would she end up alone in a parking garage 20 years from now, confronting her own impossible inheritance? Las mujeres de nuestra familia cargan con el peso del destino. The words felt heavier now, Less like memory and more like prophecy. The women of their family carried the weight of destiny. But what kind of destiny? What kind of weight? Maya's rational mind, the part shaped by her mother's determined normalcy, screamed that this was all coincidence and madness. Margaret Chen was a common name. The obituary details were lucky guesses. The handwriting was some kind of elaborate forgery, though she couldn't imagine why anyone would create such a cruel hoax. But her hands knew the truth. They recognized the pen strokes, the pressure, the tiny inconsistencies that made handwriting unique. Those letters were hers, written by fingers that somehow belonged to her across impossible years. She thought about her grandmother's disappearance, how Rosa had been there one day, brewing strange teas, muttering prayers, touching Maya's forehead with calloused palms, and gone the next. No goodbye, no explanation, just empty rooms and her mother's furious packing. Had Rosa run from this same choice? Had she opened one letter too many, seen one death too clearly, or had she embraced whatever dark gift lived in their blood? Maya's vision blurred with exhaustion and tears. She had $43 in her bank account, 3 jobs that barely kept her afloat, and a baby coming whether she was ready or not. She lived on 4 hours of sleep and dollar menu meals, measuring her life in tips and overtime hours. But this box offered something else. Knowledge. Power, maybe. The ability to warn people, to change outcomes, or maybe just the crushing burden of knowing when everyone around her would die. The envelope with her daughter's name seemed to glow in the darkness. Tomorrow's date, tomorrow's death, tomorrow's choice between ignorance and unbearable truth. Maya closed the box with shaking hands. Not yet. She wasn't ready for whatever revelation waited inside that letter. Not until she understood more about what she'd inherited, what it meant, what it would cost her. She started the car and drove home through empty streets, the box silent beside her like a sleeping bomb. Dawn was coming, bringing tomorrow's date closer with each passing minute. But for now, in the space between knowledge and ignorance, her daughter was still safe. Maya drove through Portland's empty streets, like a woman fleeing a crime scene, the box burning beside her with unspoken truths. Her apartment building loomed against the pre-dawn sky. 3 stories of peeling paint and broken dreams, home to single mothers, night shift workers, and anyone else clinging to the city's economic margins. She'd lived here for 2 years, and it still felt temporary, like everything else in her life. The stairs to the 2nd floor creaked under her weight, each step echoing in the silent hallway. Mrs. Chen from 2 Billions had left her television on again. The blue glow flickered beneath her door like a digital nightlight. Maya froze on the landing, staring at the nameplate. Another Chen. How many were there in this city? How many had died exactly as predicted in letters written by her younger self? Inside her studio apartment, Maya set the box on her kitchen table and stared at it. The cramped space felt different now, contaminated by possibility. Her futon bed, folded up to make room for walking, the mini-fridge humming desperately, the pile of bills on the counter, red stamps screaming past due. This was her world. Small, controllable, predictable in its limitations. The box didn't belong here. It belonged in Rosa's realm of candles and whispered prayers, of tea leaves that supposedly told the future and dreams that came true in terrible ways. Maya had spent her adult life building walls against that world, choosing facts over faith, reality over Rosa's mystical inheritance. But Margaret Chen's obituary had shattered those walls. Maya pulled out her laptop, a second-hand machine held together with electrical tape and prayer, and waited for it to boot up. Her internet connection crawled at dial-up speeds, but eventually the search engine loaded. She typed carefully, David Martinez, 1247 SW Morrison Street. The results took forever to load. Maya paced the narrow space between her table and bed, her hand pressed to her belly where the baby lay unnaturally still. Finally, the page refreshed. The Portland Tribune, October 3, 2015, local mechanic David Martinez, 34, died in a workplace accident yesterday when hydraulic equipment failed at Morrison Street Automotive. Martinez leaves behind a wife and 3 children. Maya's knees gave out. She sank into her single chair, staring at the screen. October 2nd, 2015. Exactly as the letter predicted. Another impossibility made real. Her fingers moved without conscious direction, typing name after name from the letters she'd glimpsed. Patricia Williams, James Foster, Robert Kim. Each search brought the same terrible confirmation, obituaries matching the predictions with surgical precision. Dates, times, locations, all accurate, all impossible. The baby hadn't moved in over an hour. Maya grabbed her keys, not bothering to change out of her cleaning uniform. The emergency room was 8 blocks away, but driving would be faster than calling an ambulance she couldn't afford. She left the box on the table, its presence filling her peripheral vision like a malevolent star. Providence Medical Center's parking lot was nearly empty at 3 a.m. Maya half ran, half waddled through the sliding doors, her breath coming in short gasps. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and despair, fluorescent lights casting everything in sickly yellow. "I need to be seen," she told the triage nurse, a tired woman with kind eyes. "My baby's not moving." The next hour blurred together, cold gel on her belly, the Doppler wand searching for a heartbeat, Maya's own heart stopping with each second of silence. Then, finally, the rapid flutter of fetal rhythm filled the room. "There she is," the technician said with a smile. "Strong heartbeat. Everything looks normal. Baby's probably just sleeping. They do that more as they get bigger." Relief flooded Maya's body like warm water. She pressed her face into her hands and sobbed, for fear, for exhaustion, for the impossible choice waiting on her kitchen table. The technician handed her tissues and spoke in soothing medical platitudes about pregnancy stress and the importance of rest. But Maya knew this hadn't been normal sleep. The stillness had come exactly when she'd found the letters, as if her daughter was somehow connected to the terrible inheritance Rosa had left behind. Walking back to her car, Maya felt the weight of inevitability settling around her shoulders like a lead blanket. She couldn't run from this. Rosa had tried, disappearing into whatever void had swallowed her 20 years ago. Maya's mother had tried, building walls of denial and ordinary American life. But the letters had found Maya anyway, patient as death itself. She drove home slowly, watching the city wake around her. Night shift workers heading home, early commuters beginning their day, the endless cycle of ordinary lives lived by people who didn't know when they would die. People who weren't bound to that knowledge like chains. Back in her apartment, the box waited exactly where she'd left it. Maya approached it like a bomb she had to defuse, knowing that her next choice would change everything. She could feel the threshold beneath her feet, the invisible line between her old life and whatever came after. The envelope with her daughter's name lay on top, tomorrow's date, now today's reality. Maya opened it with trembling hands, stepping across the threshold into the unknown. The letter inside was blank. Maya stared at the cream-colored paper, turning it over in her hands, holding it up to the light. Nothing. No date, no time, no method of death, just empty space where her daughter's fate should have been written. For a moment, relief flooded through her so powerfully she nearly collapsed. No prediction meant no death. Her daughter was safe. But the relief curdled quickly into something darker. Every other letter had been filled with precise, terrible details. Why was this one different? A knock at her door made her jump. Maya quickly stuffed the blank letter back into its envelope, her heart hammering. Nobody visited her at 4 a.m. Nobody visited her at all. Maya Rodriguez? The voice was female, accented with something European. "I know you have questions. I have answers." Maya crept to the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, elderly, maybe 70, with silver hair pulled back severely and eyes that seemed to see too much. She wore a long black coat despite the early summer heat, and her hands were covered in rings that caught the fluorescent light. "Who are you?" "My name is Elena Vasquez. I knew your grandmother. I know what you've inherited." The woman held up a wooden box nearly identical to Rosa's, though smaller and darker. "Rosa asked me to watch for this day, To help you when the letters found you. Maya's hand hovered over the deadbolt. Every instinct screamed not to open the door. Strange women didn't appear at dawn with convenient explanations and mysterious boxes. This felt like a trap, though she couldn't imagine what anyone would want from her beyond the box itself. But the blank letter burned in her mind. She needed answers, and this woman claimed to have them. Maya opened the door but kept the chain latched. "Prove you knew Rosa." Elena smiled, revealing teeth too white for her age. "Las mujeres de nuestra familia cargan con el peso del destino." Her pronunciation was perfect, inflected with the same regional accent Rosa had carried. "She taught you that, didn't she, before your mother forbade Spanish in the house?" The chain felt cold against Maya's fingers as she unlatched it. Elena stepped inside without invitation, her presence somehow making the cramped apartment feel even smaller. She moved to the kitchen table where Rosa's box sat open, the letters spilling across the surface like fallen leaves. "So many," Elena murmured, running one ringed finger over the envelopes. Rosa was powerful, but she never learned control. The gift consumed her in the end. "What gift?" Maya's voice came out as a whisper. "What is this?" Elena's dark eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. "Your bloodline is old, mija, old and bound to death itself. You are what we call mensajeras, messengers. Death speaks through your hands, shows you when and how souls will cross over. That's impossible." "Is it?" Elena gestured to the confirmed obituaries, still glowing on Maya's laptop screen. "Every woman in your line has carried this burden. Your great-grandmother Esperanza, Rosa, you, and now—" Her gaze dropped to Maya's belly. "Your daughter." Maya's hand moved protectively to her stomach. "No, I won't let her inherit this." "The gift doesn't ask permission." Elena opened her own box, revealing letters written in different handwriting, spidery, ancient-looking script. "These are mine. I've been writing death letters for 60 years. I can teach you to manage the power instead of being destroyed by it. I don't want power. I want it to stop. Then your daughter will face this alone and unprepared, as you did. As Rosa did." Elena's voice carried a note of warning. "The gift grows stronger with each generation. Without training, without understanding, it will consume her." Maya thought of the blank letter. Her letter was empty. "Does that mean—" "It means you have a choice." Elena's expression softened slightly. "The letters write themselves when death is fixed, unchangeable. Blank means the future is still fluid. You can influence it." "How?" Elena reached into her coat and pulled out a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. Rules, methods, ways to read the signs and redirect the flow of fate. Rosa never learned them. She was too proud, too afraid to seek guidance. Her power ran wild until it drove her to madness. Is that what happened to her? Madness? Rosa saw too much, too clearly. Every death in the city whispered through her fingers. She tried to save them all and shattered under the weight. Elena's voice dropped. In the end, she wrote her own letter. The apartment fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of morning traffic beginning to build. Maya stared at the journal, understanding that accepting it would mean accepting everything. The power, the responsibility, the terrible knowledge that came with it. "Why should I trust you?" Elena smiled sadly. "Because Rosa asked me to find you. Because your daughter deserves a teacher who won't let her burn." She placed the journal on the table next to Rosa's box. "Because blank letters don't stay blank forever." Maya's fingers traced the journal's worn leather cover, feeling the weight of generations pressing down on her shoulders. The apartment suddenly felt too small to contain what was happening. This inheritance that stretched back through bloodlines she'd never known existed. This terrible gift that marked her daughter before she was even born. "How long do I have?" Maya's voice barely carried across the table. "Before her letter fills itself in?" Elena's rings clinked against her teacup. When had she made tea? As she considered the question. "It depends. Some blank letters remain empty for years. Others change overnight." She paused, studying Maya's face. It depends on what choices you make, what path you choose to walk. Maya thought of her mother, Maria, who had spent Maya's entire childhood scrubbing away any trace of Rosa's influence. No Spanish, no candles, no prayers whispered over Maya's fevered forehead when she was sick. Her mother had built their life on the foundation of deliberate forgetting, and Maya had been grateful for it. Normal was safe. Normal was controllable. My mother knew, didn't she? About the letters? Maria saw Rosa write 3 letters the night before she disappeared. 3 deaths that came true the next day, exactly as predicted. Elena's voice grew heavy. Your mother was 17, pregnant with you, terrified that her child would inherit the same burden. When Rosa vanished, Maria ran as far and fast as she could. The baby stirred in Maya's belly, a flutter that felt almost like a response to the conversation. Maya pressed her palm to the movement, trying to offer comfort to a child who would inherit more than Maya had ever imagined possible. What did Rosa's last letter say? The one she wrote for herself? Elena was quiet for a long moment, that some chains can only be broken by those brave enough to forge new ones. The cryptic answer sent a chill down Maya's spine. She picked up the journal, its pages soft with age and use. The first entry was dated 1962, written in Elena's younger handwriting. The visions came true again. Mrs. Patterson, just as I saw. The gift is real, and I must learn to bear it. Teaching you won't be easy, Elena continued, watching Maya read. The power wants to consume you. It feeds on fear, on the desire to save everyone. Rosa tried to prevent every death she saw, and nearly destroyed herself in the process. You'll need to learn restraint. Maya flipped through pages of careful notes, techniques for managing visions, methods for interpreting unclear images, warnings about the cost of changing fate. The journal read like a manual for navigating nightmare, but beneath Elena's clinical observations, Maya sensed something else. Hope. Can the gift be used for good? Can we actually save people? Sometimes. Elena's smile was sad. But every life saved demands a price. Death doesn't like to be cheated. Save one person, and fate may claim another to balance the scales. The universe keeps its own accounting. Maya thought of Margaret Chen, of David Martinez, of all the names in Rosa's letters who had died exactly as predicted. Had Rosa tried to warn them? Had she watched helplessly as fate claimed its due? I need to know something first. Maya closed the journal, meeting Elena's gaze directly. Are you here to help me or to recruit me? Is this about saving my daughter or adding another messenger to your collection? The question seemed to catch Elena off guard. For the first time since entering the apartment, her composed mask slipped, revealing something raw underneath. I've been alone with this burden for 60 years, Maya, watching, writing, carrying the weight of knowing when everyone around me will die. When Rosa asked me to find you, I thought—" She trailed off, then straightened. I thought perhaps we could carry it together. The honesty in Elena's voice made Maya's chest tight. She looked around her tiny apartment, the second-hand furniture, the pile of unpaid bills, the life she'd built on the margins of ordinary existence. In 24 hours, everything had changed. The box had opened a door she could never close again. But maybe she didn't have to walk through it alone. If I do this, if I learn what's in that journal, what happens to my normal life? My jobs, my apartment, my plans for when the baby comes? Elena's laugh held no humor. Normal died the moment you opened Rosa's box. The question now is whether you'll let this power define you or learn to define it yourself. Maya stood and walked to a single window, looking out at Portland's awakening streets. Somewhere out there, people were living and dying according to fates that might already be written in letters they would never see. Her daughter kicked again, stronger this time, as if responding to her mother's rising determination. The journal waited on the table behind her, filled with 60 years of hard-won wisdom about navigating an impossible inheritance. Elena waited too, offering guidance that came with its own costs and complications. Maya touched her belly one more time, then turned back to face her new teacher. Where do we start? Elena opened the journal to a page near the middle. her finger tracing lines of faded ink. We start with the most important lesson, control. The gift will try to consume you, especially during moments of strong emotion, fear, anger, desperation. They all act as amplifiers. Maya sat back down, her body suddenly feeling the weight of the sleepless night. "What do you mean, consume me?" "Watch." Elena placed her palm flat on the table and closed her eyes. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. When Elena opened her eyes again, they were completely black, not just the irises, but the whites as well, like looking into deep water at night. Maya's breath caught as Elena's hand began to move across the table's surface, fingers tracing invisible patterns. "Mrs. Chen downstairs," Elena whispered in a voice not entirely her own. 73 years old, heart attack, Thursday morning, 6:47 a.m. in her kitchen while making coffee. "She'll call for help but won't reach the phone." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Maya watched in horror as Elena's normal eyes returned, the impossible darkness fading like smoke. Elena slumped forward, breathing hard. "That's what happens when we don't control it," Elena said, wiping perspiration from her forehead. "The gift takes over, shows us what it wants us to see. Rosa lived in that state for months before she disappeared, pure, unfiltered connection to death itself." Maya's hands were shaking. "Mrs. Chen lives downstairs from me. She gave me cookies last week when she heard I was pregnant. And now you know when she'll die." Elena's voice was matter-of-fact, but Maya caught the tremor underneath. "The question is, what will you do with that knowledge?" The weight of it hit Maya like a physical blow. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was her neighbor, a kind woman who always asked about Maya's pregnancy and left extra mail by Maya's door when packages were misdelivered. The idea of watching Mrs. Chen die, knowing it was coming and being powerless to stop it, made Maya's stomach lurch. "We have to warn her. Call 911 on Thursday morning. Tell them..." "Tell them what?" Elena's voice was sharp. "That a psychic vision revealed their grandmother will have a heart attack? That they should break down her door based on supernatural predictions?" She leaned forward. "Even if they believed you, even if they saved her, what then? Death finds another way, another time. Or it takes someone else instead. Maybe someone younger, someone with children who need them." Maya felt the baby kick hard against her ribs, as if responding to her rising panic. "So we just let her die? We know and we do nothing? We learn." Elena turned several pages in the journal, revealing detailed diagrams of what looked like meditation positions. "We understand the difference between visions we can act on and visions that are simply information." Rosa never learned that distinction. She tried to save everyone and went mad in the attempt. Maya stared at the journal, but the symbols and notes swam before her eyes. Mrs. Chen's face kept appearing in her mind. Weathered hands offering homemade cookies, kind eyes asking about baby names. "How can you live with this? How can you know when people will die and just accept it?" "Because the alternative is madness." Elena's voice softened slightly. "I tried Rosa's way once, years ago. A vision of a car accident, 5 people including 2 children. I called in a bomb threat to delay traffic, created chaos that prevented the original crash. You know what happened instead?" Maya shook her head, though she was beginning to understand. "The delayed cars created a backup that caused a different accident. 7 people died that time, including an infant. Death collected its due with interest." Elena closed the journal with a soft thud. "That's when I learned that our gift isn't meant to prevent death. It's meant to help us understand it, to prepare for it, sometimes to ease its passage. We're not gods, Maya. We're translators." The apartment fell silent except for the sound of Maya's ragged breathing. Everything she thought she understood about the choice in front of her was crumbling. This wasn't about learning to use some mystical power to save people. This was about learning to live with terrible knowledge, to carry the burden of seeing death approaching and not being able to stop it. "My daughter's letter is still blank," Maya said finally. "You said I could influence that. Because she's part of you, connected to you in ways that transcend normal fate." A mother's will, especially one carrying our gift, can sometimes redirect destiny itself. But Elena's expression grew grave. The cost of changing fate for someone so close to you would be enormous. The universe would demand payment, and it would come from the people around you. Maya's blood turned cold. You're saying that saving my daughter could kill other people? I'm saying that every choice has consequences, Elena replied. And those consequences grow exponentially when we use our power to change what's meant to be. The baby kicked again, and Maya realized she was crying. The tears came harder now, hot and desperate against Maya's cheeks. She pressed both hands to her belly, feeling her daughter's movements beneath her palms. Innocent, unaware of the terrible inheritance growing alongside her tiny limbs. "I can't do this," Maya whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't live knowing when people will die. I can't teach my daughter to accept that kind of burden. There has to be another way." Elena's expression remained impassive, but something flickered behind her dark eyes. "There is one other option, one Rosa never told you about because she was too proud to consider it." Maya looked up, hope flaring in her chest. "What?" "Severance." Elena spoke the word like it tasted bitter, cutting the bloodline's connection to the gift permanently. "It would free your daughter, ensure she never inherits our burden." "How?" Maya leaned forward, desperate. "Tell me how." Elena was quiet for a long moment, her ringed fingers drumming against the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "The ritual requires a willing sacrifice. The current carrier of the gift must choose to bear all future generations' burden alone, taking the accumulated power of the bloodline into herself until it burns her away completely." The words hit Maya like ice water. "You mean death?" "I mean freedom for every daughter who comes after. Your child would be normal, Maya, completely, utterly normal. She'd never write a death letter, never see the darkness in people's futures, never carry the weight we've carried for generations." Maya stared at the blank letter still sitting among Rosa's scattered correspondence, her daughter's name written in her own impossible handwriting, waiting for fate to fill in the terrible details, the chance to erase that completely, to give her child the ordinary life Maya had always craved. It was everything she'd wanted since opening Rosa's box. But the cost. Rosa knew about this. She discovered the ritual in the final months before she disappeared. She left notes hidden in her box, encrypted in the old Spanish our great-grandmother taught her. Elena pulled a folded paper from her coat. "I found them yesterday, while you were checking the obituaries. She was planning to perform the severance herself." Maya took the paper with trembling hands. Rosa's handwriting covered the page in spidery Spanish, but even without translation, Maya could sense the desperation in the rushed script. Her grandmother had been planning to die for her, for a granddaughter she'd never met, carrying a burden Rosa couldn't bear to pass on. Why didn't she do it? Elena's smile was infinitely sad. "Because she realized your mother was already pregnant. The ritual only works on unborn generations. Once you were born carrying the gift, Rosa's chance was gone. She disappeared instead, hoping distance might weaken the bloodline's power." The baby kicked hard against Maya's ribs, and suddenly the movement felt different. Not comforting, but urgent, as if her daughter sensed the conversation's direction. Maya pressed her hand to the spot, trying to calm them both. "If I did this," Maya said slowly, "if I performed the ritual, what exactly would happen to me? The accumulated power of 4 generations would flow into you at once. Every death vision, every unwritten letter, every burden our bloodline has carried for a century. Your body and mind couldn't contain it. The gift would consume you within hours, but completely, leaving nothing behind to pass to your daughter." Maya looked around her tiny apartment one more time, the unpaid bills on the counter, the second-hand baby furniture she'd been slowly assembling, the 3 work uniforms hanging in her closet. She'd built this small life through determination and sacrifice, working toward a future where she could give her daughter better opportunities than she'd had. Now she was being offered the chance to give her daughter something infinitely more precious. freedom from a supernatural burden that had destroyed every woman in their family line. "There's something else," Elena said quietly. "Something Rosa's notes don't mention, but I know from experience. The ritual requires specific timing. It has to be performed when the moon is dark and the barrier between life and death is thinnest. The next suitable night is tomorrow." Tomorrow. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. 24 hours to decide whether to die for a daughter she'd never hold, never see grow up, never teach to ride a bicycle or help with homework, or comfort through teenage heartbreak. But her daughter would be free, normal, safe. The blank letter seemed to pulse with possibility on the table between them. Maya reached for it with shaking hands, imagining it staying empty forever. Not because fate was undecided, but because fate would have no claim on her child at all. "I need to think," Maya whispered. Elena nodded and stood, gathering her journal and coat. "I'll return tomorrow at sunset if you decide to proceed. The ritual must begin at midnight." She paused at the door. "Maya, whatever you choose it freely. This burden has claimed enough unwilling victims." After Elena left, Maya sat alone with Rosa's letters scattered around her, holding the blank page that might seal both their fates. Outside, Portland woke to another ordinary day that felt like the end of the world. Maya sat motionless for nearly an hour after Elena left, the blank letter trembling between her fingers like a leaf in winter wind. The silence of her apartment felt different now, not peaceful but expectant, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. When she finally moved, it was to gather Rosa's scattered letters into a careful pile. Her grandmother's handwriting stared back at her from dozens of pages, each one a death sentence written in Maya's own impossible script. She arranged them chronologically, watching the progression of dates, the parade of strangers whose final moments had been predicted with surgical precision. Margaret Chen, David Martinez, Sarah Williams. Name after name of people who had lived and died according to Rosa's visions, their fates sealed in ink before they'd even known death was approaching. But as Maya read more carefully, something Elena hadn't mentioned began to emerge from the letters. They weren't just predictions, they were prayers. "Margaret, may you find peace in your final breath. May your family's grief be brief and healing. David, may your last moment be without pain. May your children remember your laughter, not your leaving." Each letter contained not just the clinical details of death, but wishes for comfort, for dignity, for gentle passage from life into whatever came after. Rosa hadn't been a cold prophet of doom. She'd been a woman trying to offer what blessing she could to strangers she'd never meet but whose deaths she was forced to witness. Maya's hand stilled on a letter dated just 3 months before Rosa's disappearance. The handwriting was shakier here, desperate. "Elena Rodriguez, my teacher, my friend, my fellow prisoner. You will live to 93, but oh, the loneliness you will carry. May you find someone to share this burden before your time comes. May you not die alone with our terrible gift. Elena." Maya's breath caught as she realized what she was reading. Rosa had written Elena's death letter too, had seen her friend's fate stretching decades into the future. No wonder Elena had seemed so composed, so accepting of death's inevitability. She already knew exactly how many years she had left. The baby kicked, harder than usual, and Maya gasped at the sharp pressure against her ribs. She pressed her palm to the spot, feeling her daughter's restless movement. "Easy, little one," she whispered. "Mama's here." But even as she spoke the comforting words, a terrible realization was crystallizing in her mind. Elena had said the ritual required willing sacrifice, that Maya could choose to bear all future generations' burden to free her daughter. But Elena had also demonstrated the gift's power, shown Maya exactly how it felt to be consumed by visions of death. What if Elena's offer wasn't motivated purely by kindness? What if a woman who'd carried this burden alone for 60 years, who knew she had 33 more years of isolation ahead of her, might see Maya's desperate love as an opportunity? Maya stood abruptly, pacing to her single window. Portland stretched out below her, ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware that somewhere in the city 2 women were discussing supernatural inheritance and ritual suicide. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, trying to think clearly through her exhaustion and fear. Elena's journal had contained 60 years of careful observations, techniques for managing visions, warnings about the cost of changing fate. But it had also felt like recruitment material, a guidebook for accepting the unacceptable. Every page reinforced the same message: the gift was inevitable, fighting it led to madness, the only choice was surrender. Except Rosa hadn't surrendered. Rosa had discovered the severance ritual and planned to use it. Rosa had been willing to die to free future generations from this curse. Maya pulled out her phone and searched for Elena Rodriguez online. She found nothing. No social media profiles, no public records, no digital footprint at all. For a woman who claimed to have lived in Portland for decades, Elena existed entirely off the grid. The blank letter seemed to mock her from the table. Maya walked over and picked it up again, studying every inch of the paper. It looked identical to all of Rosa's other letters. Same paper, same faded quality, same mysterious appearance of her own handwriting. But this one remained stubbornly empty, waiting for fate or choice to fill in its terrible details. Unless it was never meant to be filled in, unless the blank letter wasn't a prediction waiting to happen, but a possibility waiting to be chosen. Maya's heart began to race as a new understanding flooded through her. What if the severance ritual was real, but Elena had lied about its requirements? What if the ritual didn't demand Maya's death, but her commitment, a willing acceptance of the gift that would bind it to her alone, preventing its passage to her daughter? The baby kicked again, and this time Maya felt it differently. Not distress, but urgency. Her daughter wasn't afraid. She was trying to communicate something her mother desperately needed to understand. Maya looked at the blank letter one more time, and suddenly she knew with absolute certainty that Elena had been lying about something crucial. The question was, how much of what she'd been told was true, and how much was manipulation designed to make her choose death over discovery? Tomorrow at sunset, Elena would return expecting an answer. Maya smiled grimly, folding the blank letter carefully and placing it in her pocket. She would have one ready. Maya spent the night surrounded by Rosa's letters, but this time she read them as a detective rather than a victim. By dawn, patterns had emerged that Elena's careful guidance had obscured. The dates told a story Elena hadn't wanted her to see. Rosa's early letters showed deaths scattered randomly across months, sometimes years apart. But as the years progressed, the visions came faster, clustering around significant dates: full moons, eclipses, the anniversary of Rosa's mother's death. The gift wasn't constant. It ebbed and flowed according to cosmic rhythms Elena had never mentioned. More importantly, Maya found letters Rosa had never sent. Draft after draft of predictions that had been written, then deliberately destroyed, all except the copies Rosa had hidden in the box's false bottom. Maya discovered the hidden compartment by accident when her restless pacing knocked the box from the table, splitting one corner to reveal a thin gap in the wood. Inside lay Rosa's real journal, not Elena's careful observations about managing the gift, but Rosa's desperate experiments in fighting it. June 15th. Tried disrupting my sleep cycle during the dark moon. No visions for 3 days straight. The gift needs ritual, needs rhythm. It can be starved. August 3rd. Meditation techniques from the curandera in Guadalajara. Focus on life instead of death, on birth instead of endings. Wrote a letter predicting Maria Santos's recovery from cancer instead of her death. She lived. She lived. October 12th. Elena says I'm being reckless. The changing fate brings consequences. But what if the consequences are worth it? What if we've been slaves to a gift that was meant to serve us? Maya's hands shook as she read Rosa's final entries. Her grandmother hadn't disappeared in defeat. She'd vanished because she'd discovered something that threatened everything Elena believed about their inherited burden. December 1st. Elena won't help anymore. Says I'm courting madness, that the gift will consume me if I keep fighting, but I've found others. Women in Mexico City whose family carried similar burdens. They broke their curse 3 generations ago. No ritual sacrifice needed, just understanding that the gift responds to will, not fate. December 15th. Elena destroyed my letters to the other women. Says I'm endangering Maya by corresponding with charlatans. But Elena is afraid. I see it now. She's built her entire identity around being a victim of this gift. If it can be controlled, what does that make her choice to surrender? December 20th. Must leave tonight. Elena threatened to reveal my location to forces that police are kind. Don't know if she means other gift bearers or something worse. Hidden this journal for Maya. If she ever finds it, she needs to know. The gift bows to will, but only if you're brave enough to claim dominion over it. The baby kicked sharply, and Maya felt a surge of fierce protectiveness that had nothing to do with supernatural intuition and everything to do with maternal fury. Elena had been manipulating her from the moment they'd met, using Maya's fear and desperation to push her toward a choice that served Elena's worldview, not Maya's daughter's future. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ready to discuss your decision? I can come early if needed. E. Instead of responding, Maya called in sick to all 3 of her jobs and spent the day in Portland's main library, researching everything she could find about supernatural gifts, ancestral curses, and the women who'd claimed to break them. What she found changed everything. The internet was full of stories like hers, families carrying unexplained burdens for generations, always told they were powerless to change their fate. But buried in forums and academic papers, she found the other stories. Women in Guatemala who'd redirected their family's curse toward healing instead of harm. Sisters in New Orleans who'd transformed their inherited ability to see death into a gift for easing dying patients' final moments. A grandmother in Salem who'd taught her descendants to use their supernatural sensitivity to help solve missing persons cases instead of predicting deaths. The pattern was always the same. Someone in the family line had refused to accept that the gift controlled them, had insisted instead on controlling the gift. Maya's phone rang as she printed the most promising research. Elena's number flashed on the screen, but Maya let it go to voicemail. She wasn't ready to face Elena until she'd found Rosa's contacts in Mexico City. It took 6 hours and her rudimentary Spanish, but she finally reached a woman named Carmen Esperanza, whose grandmother had carried a gift similar to Maya's. Carmen's English was better than Maya's Spanish, and her story gave Maya the final piece she needed. The gift is not curse, Carmen explained over the crackling international connection, is tool that forgot its purpose. Your ancestor, she write death because death was all she could see. But gifts grow with intention. You want to see life? You practice seeing life. Takes time, takes will, but is possible. What about the ritual, the severance? Carmen's laugh was warm despite the static. Only severance needed is from people who profit from your fear. Gift cannot be destroyed, only transformed. Your daughter, she will inherit something beautiful if you teach gift new language. When Elena arrived at sunset, Maya was ready for her. Maya opened the door before Elena could knock, her face set with a determination that made the older woman pause mid-step. I've made my decision, Maya said, stepping aside to let Elena enter. The apartment looked different now. Rosa's letters arranged in precise chronological order across the coffee table, the wooden box sitting open beside them, its false bottom exposed. Maya's laptop glowed on the kitchen counter, still displaying the forum posts and research articles she'd spent the day consuming. Elena's eyes swept the room, taking in the evidence of Maya's investigation. Her composed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that might have been annoyance or fear. I see you've been busy. I found Rosa's real journal. Maya picked up the thin notebook, holding it between them like a shield. The one you didn't want me to see. The one that explains why you really came looking for me. Maya, whatever you think you've discovered, you lied about the ritual. Maya's voice was steady despite the anger burning in her chest. There is no severance that requires my death. Rosa figured out how to transform the gift, not destroy it. She found other women who'd done the same thing, women you made sure she never contacted again. Elena set down her coat with deliberate care, buying herself time. When she spoke, her voice carried 60 years of practiced authority. Your grandmother was deluding herself. I've seen what happens when our kind tries to fight fate. Madness, Maya. Complete psychological breakdown within months. Show me. Maya crossed her arms over her expanding belly. Show me one piece of evidence that any woman in our bloodline went insane from refusing to accept death visions. Just one documented case. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her journal, then stopped. Her shoulders sagged, and suddenly she looked every one of her 74 years. You don't understand what it's like, Elena whispered. 60 years of watching people die exactly as I predicted. 60 years of being death's secretary, taking dictation from fate itself. When Rosa started talking about transformation, about controlling the gift, it felt like blasphemy. It felt like hope, Maya corrected. And that terrified you. Elena flinched as if Maya had struck her. Hope is dangerous for people like us. Hope makes you careless. I've built a life around accepting what cannot be changed, and it's kept me sane when others in our line have shattered completely. What others? Maya pulled out her phone, displaying the call log from her conversation with Carmen. Because I spent today talking to women whose families broke similar curses. They're not insane, Elena. They're free. The older woman stared at the phone as if it were a snake. You called strangers? Told them about our gift? I called survivors. Maya felt the baby shift restlessly, responding to her elevated heart rate. She forced herself to breathe slowly, staying calm for both their sakes. Women who refused to accept that supernatural gifts had to be supernatural prisons. Elena sank into Maya's worn armchair, looking defeated. Even if transformation were possible, and I'm not saying it is, the process would take years, decades perhaps. Your daughter would still inherit the original gift while you learned to reshape it. She'd still suffer. Maybe. Maya sat across from her, Rosa's journal still clutched in her hands. But she'd also inherit a mother who fought instead of surrendering, a legacy of resistance instead of resignation. That has to count for something. The gift doesn't care about your intentions, Maya. It responds to fear, to death, to endings. It's drawn to darkness, because that's its nature. Whose nature? Maya leaned forward, studying Elena's face carefully. The gift's or yours? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Elena's composure cracked completely, revealing raw pain beneath her careful control. I've spent 6 decades being afraid, Elena admitted. Afraid of the visions, afraid of changing fate, afraid of what might happen if I stopped cooperating with death itself. When Rosa started talking about alternatives, she threatened everything I'd built my identity around. If the gift could be controlled, what excuse did I have for 60 years of passive suffering? Maya felt a surge of unexpected sympathy. You could have learned alongside her, changed together. I was too scared. Elena's voice broke, too invested in being a victim. And when she disappeared, I told myself it proved I was right, that fighting the gift had destroyed her. But you knew better. Elena nodded miserably. I found her letters from Mexico City after she vanished, the ones describing successful transformations, families who'd broken the pattern. I burned them. She looked up at Maya with haunted eyes. I burned them because I couldn't bear the possibility that I'd wasted my entire life accepting what could have been changed. The baby kicked hard, and Maya pressed her hand to the spot, feeling her daughter's strong, determined movement. It's not too late for either of us. Elena stared at her for a long moment, then slowly pulled the ritual instructions from her coat pocket. Without breaking eye contact, she tore them in half. Tomorrow we start learning to transform instead of surrender, Elena said quietly. If you'll trust a foolish old woman who forgot that courage was an option. Outside, Portland settled into evening, unaware that 2 women had just chosen hope over fear, transformation over sacrifice, and the uncertain promise of change over the familiar comfort of inherited defeat. Maya woke to the sound of rain against her window and the strange certainty that today would test everything she thought she'd learned about courage. The blank letter lay on her nightstand where she'd placed it before sleep, still empty, still waiting, but something had changed during the night. A shift in the air, a heaviness that made her skin prickle with anticipation. The baby was unusually still, as if she too sensed that something momentous was approaching. Maya's phone buzzed at exactly 6 a.m. Elena's name flashed on the screen, but when Maya answered, the older woman's voice carried an urgency that made her stomach clench. "They're coming," Elena said without preamble. "I should have warned you yesterday, but I hoped—" Her voice cracked. "Maya, there are others. Guardians of the old ways. They know what we discussed. What are you talking about? The gift isn't just family inheritance. It's part of something larger, older. There are those who, policewomen like us, who ensure the natural order isn't disrupted." Elena's breathing was ragged. "I may have contacted them years ago when Rosa started her experiments. I thought I was protecting our bloodline, but the line went dead." Maya tried calling back, but Elena's phone went straight to voicemail. Fear shot through her veins as she remembered Rosa's journal entry about Elena threatening to reveal her location to forces that police are kind. She'd thought it was paranoia. But what if Rosa had been right? She was reaching for her jacket when 3 sharp knocks echoed through her apartment. Maya froze, her hand halfway to the door. It was barely past sunrise, too early for neighbors, too formal for friends. The knocking came again, measured and patient, as if whoever stood outside had all the time in the world. "Maya Rodriguez," a woman's voice called through the door. "We need to speak with you about your inheritance." Maya's blood turned to ice. Through the peephole she saw 2 women in dark coats standing in her hallway. They looked ordinary enough, middle-aged, professional, the kind of people who might work for a bank or insurance company. But something about their perfect stillness, the way they stood without shifting their weight or glancing around, felt deeply wrong. "We know you have Rosa's letters," the woman continued. "We know Elena Rodriguez has been interfering with your education. We're here to correct that interference." Maya backed away from the door, her mind racing. Her apartment had only one exit, and these women were blocking it. Her phone showed no signal, impossible in downtown Portland, unless someone was deliberately jamming it. The baby suddenly kicked hard, a sharp jab that made Maya gasp, but as her hand pressed to the spot, something extraordinary happened. The blank letter on her nightstand began to shimmer, words appearing across its surface in her own handwriting. "Today you choose. Death or dominion, surrender or sovereignty. Your daughter's fate hangs in the balance, but fate itself can be rewritten by those brave enough to hold the pen." Maya stared at the letter, understanding flooding through her. This wasn't a prediction, it was an invitation, the ultimate test Elena had mentioned, but not in the way either of them had expected. "We can help you," the woman outside continued, her voice carrying an hypnotic quality that made Maya want to open the door despite every instinct screaming danger. "The burden you've inherited doesn't have to destroy you. There are ways to manage the gift that Elena hasn't taught you, ancient protocols that keep women like us safe and useful." Safe and useful. The words hit Maya like a slap. Not free, useful. These weren't guardians protecting gifted women, they were collectors, ensuring that supernatural abilities remained under institutional control rather than individual will. Maya looked around her tiny apartment, taking inventory. Rosa's letters still covered her coffee table, Elena's torn ritual instructions lay scattered nearby, and her laptop held all the research about women who'd successfully transformed their inherited gifts. Everything she needed to make an informed choice, if she was brave enough to trust her own judgment over the authorities outside her door. The baby kicked again, and this time Maya felt something that might have been encouragement. Her daughter wasn't afraid. She was ready for whatever choice her mother was about to make. Maya picked up the blank letter, now filled with her own handwriting, and read it one more time. Then she walked to the door, placed her palm flat against its surface, and made her decision. "I know what you're offering," she called through the door, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And I know what Elena was too scared to tell me, but I also know what Rosa discovered before she disappeared." Silence from the hallway, but Maya could feel the women's attention sharpening, focusing on her words with predatory intensity. "The gift doesn't belong to you," Maya continued, pressing both hands to her belly where her daughter waited. "It belongs to us, and we're taking it back." The temperature in her apartment dropped 10 degrees in an instant, and Maya knew the real test was about to begin. The door handle began to turn on its own, metal groaning against the deadbolt as supernatural force met Maya's mundane lock. Frost spread across the wood in delicate patterns that looked beautiful and terrifying, like death wearing evening gowns. "You don't understand what you're refusing," the woman outside said, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated in Maya's bones. "We offer protection. Without us, the gift will consume you completely within months. Your daughter will inherit madness along with the visions." Maya pressed her back against the door, using her body weight to reinforce the failing lock. The baby kicked frantically, and suddenly Maya could feel her daughter's presence not as a passive passenger, but as an active participant in this confrontation. The letter in her hand grew warm, words shifting and changing, as if responding to both their wills combined. "They fear what we might become," appeared in fresh ink. 3 generations of surrendered power. They hunger for submission. The apartment's lights flickered, then blazed brighter than their circuit should have allowed. Maya's reflection in the dark window showed something impossible. For just a moment, she saw Rosa standing behind her, transparent but determined, her hands resting over Maya's on her swollen belly. Elena materialized beside Rosa, tears streaming down her face but her jaw set with newfound resolve. "I'm sorry," Elena's voice whispered through the supernatural static filling the air. "I led them to you. 60 years of cowardice, and I betrayed you just like I betrayed Rosa. You can still choose differently." Rosa's voice joined hers, speaking Spanish that Maya somehow understood perfectly. "The gift recognizes intention, mija. Show it yours." The door began to splinter around the edges. Through the cracks, Maya glimpsed not ordinary women, but something ancient wearing human shapes. Beings that fed on surrendered power, that had spent generations convincing gifted women they were helpless victims instead of potential masters of their own fate. Maya looked down at the letter, watching words appear faster now, written in 3 distinct handwritings that somehow harmonized into one message. The choice was always ours. Death serves life, not the reverse. Time to remember what we were before they taught us to be afraid. The baby kicked once more, and Maya felt her daughter's will joining with hers and Rosa's and Elena's. 4 generations of women, connected across time and space, ready to reclaim what had been surrendered in fear. Maya stepped away from the door and spoke the words that appeared on the letter as she read them. "I reject your protection. I reject your protocols. I reject the lie that power over life and death belongs to anyone but those who carry it." The apartment exploded with light. Not harsh fluorescent brightness, but the warm golden glow of sunrise breaking through storm clouds. The door stopped splintering, the temperature returned to normal, and in the sudden silence that followed, Maya heard something she'd never expected, the sound of footsteps retreating down the hallway. But the confrontation wasn't over. Maya could feel it building, the real test approaching like thunder after lightning. The entities outside had been scouts, testing her resolve. What came next would be the actual battle for her daughter's future. The letter in her hand burst into flames that didn't burn, consuming itself in supernatural fire that left behind a new message written in ash that glowed like embers. Tonight, the storage unit, where it all began. Come alone or come with allies, your choice, but come ready to fight for dominion over your own gift. The old contracts end at midnight, new ones begin with dawn. Maya looked at her reflection in the window again. Rosa and Elena had faded, but their presence lingered like warmth after an embrace. She wasn't alone in this fight, would never be alone again. The women in her bloodline had finally chosen to stand together instead of surrendering separately. She grabbed Rosa's journal, Elena's phone number, and the wooden box that had started everything. Whatever waited for her at the storage unit tonight, she would face it not as a victim of inherited fate, but as a woman ready to reshape that fate entirely. The baby settled into stillness, no longer restless but focused, as if she too understood that tonight would determine what kind of world she'd be born into. Maya pressed her hand to her belly one more time, feeling the strength of 4 generations flowing through her veins. "We're going to win this," she whispered to her daughter. "Not just survive it, win it." Outside, Portland woke to an ordinary Wednesday morning, unaware that extraordinary changes were stirring in a tiny apartment where a pregnant woman prepared for the fight of her supernatural life. The confrontation had begun, but Maya Rodriguez was no longer afraid. She was ready. The storage unit stood before Maya like a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. Night had fallen over Portland with unusual darkness, as if the city itself held its breath for what was about to unfold. The facility's security lights flickered erratically, casting shifting shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. Maya's hands trembled as she fitted Rosa's key into the rusted lock. Behind her, Elena emerged from a taxi, moving with the careful determination of someone who had spent all day preparing for battle. They had agreed to face this together, 2 women separated by decades, but united by blood and the terrible weight of inherited gifts. "Are you sure about this?" Elena asked, though her voice carried none of yesterday's hesitation. She had spent the morning researching, the afternoon practicing meditation techniques Rosa had written about, and the evening calling the other women Carmen had connected them with. Elena Rodriguez was no longer running from her legacy. "No," Maya admitted, pressing her free hand to her belly where her daughter waited in unusual stillness. "But I'm sure about her, about what she deserves to inherit." The lock clicked open with a sound like breaking bones. Inside, the storage unit had transformed. Gone were the dusty furniture and moth-eaten clothes Maya remembered. Instead, the space opened into something impossible, a circular chamber lined with mirrors that reflected not their physical forms, but the ghostly outlines of women stretching back through generations. Maya saw Rosa clearly now, and behind her, Elena's mother, and behind her, a line of female figures extending into supernatural darkness. At the center of the chamber sat the wooden box, but it was no longer the small container Maya had discovered weeks ago. It had grown, expanding into something the size of an altar, its surface carved with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe in the flickering light. "The repository of surrendered will," Elena whispered, recognition dawning in her voice. "I thought it was just a story Rosa made up to frighten me." "Every story in our family is true," Maya said, understanding flooding through her as her daughter kicked once, sharp and purposeful. "The question is whether we keep feeding it our power or take that power back." The mirrors began to show scenes, flashes of women throughout history, each one faced with the same choice Maya now confronted. Most knelt before similar altars, offering their gifts to ancient entities that promised protection in exchange for servitude. But some stood tall, grasped their inherited power with both hands, and transformed it into something new. "Rosa was right," Elena said, her voice thick with 60 years of suppressed regret. "We were never meant to be death's secretaries. We were meant to be life's accountants, balancing the books between existence and ending." The wooden box began to glow, and Maya heard a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Approach, daughter of daughters. The contract your bloodline signed in desperation can be dissolved, but only through willing sacrifice." Maya stepped forward, feeling the weight of 4 generations in her movements. "What sacrifice?" "Your certainty," the voice replied, and suddenly Maya understood. "Surrender your need to know the future. Release your grip on prediction and control. Accept that true power lies not in seeing death approach, but in nurturing life while it lasts. The choice crystallized before her with terrible clarity. She could keep the gift, learn to master it as Rosa had begun to do, and spend her life walking the razor's edge between prophecy and madness. Her daughter would inherit a transformed legacy, but still a legacy of burden. Or she could give it up entirely, break the chain, let her daughter be born ordinary, human, free, but vulnerable in ways Maya couldn't predict or prevent. "There's a third option," Elena said suddenly, stepping beside Maya. Something Rosa figured out but never had the chance to complete. She reached into her coat and pulled out a letter Maya had never seen before, worn pages covered in Rosa's handwriting. She didn't disappear because she failed. She disappeared because she succeeded. Maya read the letter with growing amazement. Rosa hadn't just transformed the gift. She had learned to share it, to distribute the burden across willing communities instead of concentrating it in single bloodlines. She had found others, built networks, created support systems that allowed supernatural abilities to serve life instead of death. But she needed help, Elena continued, tears streaming down her face. She needed family who would choose courage over safety. "I failed her then, but I won't fail you now." Maya looked at her reflection in the mirrors and saw not just herself, but Elena, Rosa, and the faint outline of her unborn daughter. 4 generations of women, finally united in purpose. The sacrifice required wasn't Maya's gift or her certainty about the future. The sacrifice was Elena's lifetime of fear, Rosa's years of exile, and Maya's dreams of a perfectly normal life for her daughter. Instead, they would build something unprecedented, a legacy of shared power, community support, and supernatural gifts used to preserve life rather than predict death. Maya placed her hand on the wooden box and felt Elena's hand cover hers. "We choose transformation," Maya said, speaking for all of them. "We choose each other." The storage unit filled with light as their decision rewrote the future itself. The light faded gradually, like dawn breaking in reverse, leaving Maya and Elena standing in what was once again an ordinary storage unit filled with dusty furniture and forgotten belongings. But everything had changed, even if the transformation wasn't immediately visible. Maya's legs gave out, and she sank onto an old wooden chair, her hands shaking as the full weight of what they'd accomplished settled over her. The wooden box had returned to its original size, sitting innocuously among Rosa's possessions, but Maya could feel its power had fundamentally shifted. No longer a repository of surrendered will, it had become something else entirely, a connection point, a bridge between the women who had chosen courage and those who would need their support. "I can still feel it," Maya whispered, pressing her palms to her temples. "The gift, but it's different." Elena nodded, settling beside her with the careful movements of someone who had aged decades in a single night. Rosa wrote about this, the sensation of power shared rather than hoarded, like having supernatural peripheral vision instead of tunnel vision. The baby kicked, but gently now, a sleepy flutter rather than the urgent jabs Maya had grown accustomed to. For the first time in weeks, her daughter felt truly at peace, as if she too understood that the burden crushing their bloodline had finally lifted. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from Carmen felt something shift tonight. "Hope it was good news. Coffee tomorrow?" And another from a number she didn't recognize. "My grandmother just called me crying. Said she felt our family's curse break across 3 states. Thank you." And another, "The nightmares stopped. My daughter is sleeping through the night for the first time in months." Elena watched Maya scroll through the messages, a mixture of wonder and grief crossing her weathered features. 60 years, she said softly. 60 years I could have helped build this instead of hiding from it. "You're helping now," Maya said, covering Elena's hand with her own. "That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the detritus of Rosa's hidden life. Tomorrow, there would be practical concerns. Maya's jobs, her pregnancy, the logistics of building a network to support others like them. But tonight, they simply existed in the aftermath of transformation, feeling the reverberations of their choice ripple outward through invisible connections. "What do we tell her?" Maya asked eventually, one hand resting on her belly. "When she's old enough to understand what she inherited." Elena smiled, and for the first time since Maya had met her, it reached her eyes completely. "We tell her she was born into a family of women who learned to rewrite fate, that her power, whatever form it takes, belongs to her, not to ancient contracts or institutional controllers, that she has sisters everywhere, connected by choice rather than blood." Maya nodded, imagining her daughter growing up in a world where supernatural gifts meant community support rather than isolated burden, where the women in her family gathered around kitchen tables to share the weight of their abilities instead of bearing them alone in storage units and shame. Her phone rang. "Elena's number." "Your phone is right here," Maya said, confused. Elena checked her pockets, then her purse. "That's impossible. She trailed off, understanding dawning on her face. "Rosa?" Maya answered, her heart hammering. "Grandmother?" Rosa's voice came through clear as morning bells, speaking Spanish that Maya understood perfectly now. "Mija, I felt the change from 3,000 miles away. You did what I was too afraid to finish." "Where are you?" Maya asked, tears streaming down her face. "Building the foundation we'll need for what comes next. The entities you faced tonight were scouts, but others will follow. The old systems don't surrender power easily." Rosa's voice carried love and determination in equal measure. "But now we have something they've never encountered, a bloodline that refuses to be broken, that transforms oppression into liberation." Maya looked around the storage unit, seeing it now not as a repository of Rosa's exile, but as the birthplace of revolution. "When can we see you?" "Soon. There are preparations to make, women to gather, safe houses to establish. But Maya," Rosa's voice grew tender, "you saved us all. Your daughter will inherit a legacy of strength, not suffering." The call ended, leaving Maya and Elena in the kind of silence that follows miracles. Outside, Portland hummed with ordinary midnight activity, unaware that the supernatural had just shifted toward justice. Maya stood slowly, her back aching and her daughter settling into sleep. "We should go home." Elena nodded, then hesitated. "Maya? I know I have 60 years of cowardice to make up for, but I want to help, however I can." "I know exactly where to start," Maya said, picking up Rosa's journal and the transformed wooden box. "We're going to need a bigger apartment. Space for meetings, for the women who'll need sanctuary, for building something unprecedented." As they locked the storage unit behind them, Maya felt her daughter stir once more, not with distress but with anticipation, as if she too was eager to be born into this new world they'd created. The future stretched before them, uncertain but no longer terrifying. They had chosen transformation over tradition, community over isolation, hope over surrender, and, for the first time in generations, the women of their bloodline were truly free. 2 weeks later, Maya stood in the doorway of her new apartment, watching women she'd never imagined meeting arrange folding chairs in what had once been her living room. The space buzzed with quiet conversation in multiple languages, Spanish, Mandarin, what sounded like Russian, but underneath the linguistic differences ran a current of shared understanding that needed no translation. Carmen arrived with coffee and pastries, her usual efficiency now tinged with something Maya had never seen before, contentment. The hollow look that had haunted her eyes since Maya first met her at the diner had been replaced by the steady gaze of someone who finally understood her place in the world. "How are you feeling?" Carmen asked, setting down the food and pressing a gentle hand to Maya's shoulder. "You look different." Maya caught her reflection in the window and realized Carmen was right. The exhaustion that had carved lines around her eyes was gone, replaced by something she barely recognized: peace. Not the fragile peace of denial or avoidance, but the solid foundation that came from accepting difficult truths and choosing to transform them. "Rested," Maya said, surprising herself with the honesty. For the first time in months, actually rested. Her daughter had been moving differently too, settling into sleep patterns that seemed almost normal. Dr. Martinez had expressed amazement at Maya's latest checkup. Blood pressure stable, stress hormones within normal ranges, the baby's heartbeat steady and strong. Maya hadn't bothered explaining that supernatural transformation apparently had measurable medical benefits. Elena emerged from the kitchen carrying a steaming pot of tea, moving through the space like she'd lived there for years instead of days. She'd given up her own apartment without hesitation, bringing nothing but 3 suitcases and 6 decades of accumulated guilt she seemed determined to transform into action. "Rosa called this morning," Elena said quietly, settling the teapot on the coffee table they'd pushed against the wall to make room for the circle of chairs. "She's found 12 more families scattered across the southwest, all of them carrying variations of what we inherited." Maya nodded, no longer surprised by such news. The network was revealing itself organically, women who had spent lifetimes hiding their abilities suddenly drawn to share their experiences. The wooden box, now displayed openly on Maya's bookshelf, seemed to pulse with each new connection, its carved surface growing warmer as their community expanded. "Before we start," Elena continued, "there's someone here I think you should meet." She gestured toward a young woman sitting near the window, her hands folded protectively over a small bump barely visible beneath her sweater. The woman looked up as Maya approached, her eyes wide with the particular terror Maya recognized intimately. "Sophia," the woman said softly, I think I'm about 4 months along, and yesterday I started seeing things, writing things, letters that predict—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Maya settled into the chair beside her, remembering her own horror at discovering the letters in Rosa's box. "How did you find us?" "My grandmother. She said she felt something change 2 weeks ago, like a weight lifting off our family. She told me to come here, said there were women who would understand." Sophia's voice shook. "Is it true? That it doesn't have to be a curse?" Before Maya could answer, Elena was there with tea, and Carmen had pulled up another chair, and suddenly Sophia was surrounded by women who nodded with recognition instead of fear, who reached out to steady her trembling hands instead of pulling away in horror. "It's true," Maya said, watching Sophia's face transform as the words sank in. "Whatever you're inheriting, whatever your daughter might carry, it belongs to you, not to fate, not to some cosmic plan, but to you, and you don't have to carry it alone." The formal meeting that followed was unlike anything Maya had experienced. Stories emerged that spanned continents and generations, women who dreamed other people's deaths, who could sense illness before symptoms appeared, who saw accidents moments before they happened. But instead of the isolated desperation Maya expected, each story was met with understanding, practical advice, emotional support. Rosa's journal circulated through the group, translated and discussed, its techniques adapted for abilities Maya hadn't known existed. Elena shared contact information for the other families Rosa had found, building a communication network that stretched across state lines. Carmen organized schedules for regular meetings, support calls, emergency protocols. As evening fell and the women began to leave, Maya found herself alone with Elena in their transformed apartment. The space felt larger somehow, as if hosting community had expanded its physical dimensions along with its purpose. "Your grandmother would be proud," Elena said, washing teacups in the kitchen sink. Maya smiled, feeling Rosa's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. "She is proud. They all are." Her daughter kicked once, gently, and Maya pressed her hand to her belly with a sense of anticipation rather than dread. Soon she would hold this child, who would grow up surrounded by women who had chosen transformation over surrender, community over isolation. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer frightening. They had returned to the world changed, carrying light instead of burden, ready to build something unprecedented from the ashes of inherited fear. The new beginning. 3 months after her daughter's birth, Maya stood at the kitchen window of their expanded apartment, watching Portland's morning rain paint silver streaks down the glass. In her arms, Elena Rosa Rodriguez, named for both grandmothers who had shaped their transformation, slept with the peaceful expression of a child born into acceptance rather than fear. The baby stirred, tiny fingers grasping at something invisible, and Maya felt the familiar flutter of recognition. Her daughter was dreaming, and in those dreams Maya glimpsed fragments of possibility rather than certainty. The gift had indeed passed to this new generation, but transformed, no longer prophecy carved in stone, but whispered suggestions of paths that might unfold. "She's beautiful when she sleeps," Elena said softly, emerging from the back bedroom where she'd been setting up chairs for the morning's video conference. The apartment had evolved into something between home and headquarters, walls lined with whiteboards tracking the growing network of families, tables covered with translated journals from women who had spent centuries hiding their gifts. "She's beautiful when she's awake too," Maya replied, though privately she treasured these quiet moments before her daughter's eyes opened to reveal depths that reminded her of Rosa's photographs. Even when she's screaming at 3 a.m. because she's sensing someone's anxiety across town. They had learned to read Elena Rosa's cries, distinguishing between ordinary infant needs and the supernatural sensitivity that occasionally overwhelmed her developing nervous system. Maya's support group, now 37 women strong, had shared techniques passed down through generations, methods for helping gifted children process overwhelming input without losing themselves to it. Carmen knocked softly before entering, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a tablet displaying faces of women scattered across multiple time zones. The weekly coordination calls had become essential as their network expanded beyond anything Rosa had imagined possible. Stories emerged from every continent, patterns of inherited ability that suggested their family's experience was part of something far larger and older than they had originally understood. "Sophia's ready to share her birth story," Carmen said, settling into her chair with the ease of someone who had found her calling. She had quit her 2nd and 3rd jobs, using savings Maya hadn't known she possessed to help coordinate what had become a full-time mission of connection and support. "And there's a woman in Edinburgh who thinks her great-grandmother might have known Rosa." Maya shifted her daughter to one arm and accepted the coffee gratefully. These morning calls had become sacred time, a chance to weave individual experiences into collective wisdom. Today's agenda included protocol development for emergency support, discussion of a safe house network Carmen was establishing, and celebration of small victories that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. Elena Rosa opened her eyes, dark brown flecked with gold, startlingly alert for a 3-month-old, and Maya felt the gentle brush of her daughter's awareness against her consciousness. Not intrusive or demanding, but curious, as if the baby were asking permission before exploring the emotional landscape around her. "Good morning, little prophet," Maya whispered, using the pet name that had emerged organically. "Ready to help change the world today?" Her daughter gurgled, a sound that somehow managed to convey both amusement and determination. Maya had stopped being surprised by her child's apparent understanding of complex concepts. This was simply their new normal, a reality where supernatural awareness coexisted with ordinary human experience, where gifts once considered curses had become tools for building community. The tablet screen filled with familiar faces as women joined the call from Denver, Miami, Los Angeles. Sophia appeared from Portland's east side, her own infant daughter visible in her arms, another member of the generation that would grow up understanding their abilities as natural rather than shameful. "Before we begin," Carmen said, her voice taking on the formal tone she used for important announcements, "I have news from Rosa." The conversation stilled. Rosa had been traveling for months, following leads that connected their family's experience to similar lineages worldwide. Her calls came sporadically, usually bearing intelligence about the entities that had controlled their gifts for generations and the ongoing work of dismantling those ancient power structures. "She's coming home," Carmen continued, unable to suppress her smile. 2 weeks, and she's bringing representatives from 7 other families who've successfully completed their own transformations. Maya felt tears prick her eyes, imagining the reunion she'd dreamed of since that night in the storage unit. Her daughter would finally meet the great-grandmother whose courage had made their freedom possible. Rosa would hold the child who represented everything she had sacrificed years of exile to achieve. Elena Rosa chose that moment to laugh, a sound of pure joy that seemed to encompass all the hope and healing their family had fought to create. On the screen, 37 women laughed with her, their voices creating harmony across distances and languages. Maya pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead, tasting the salt of grateful tears. Outside, Portland's rain continued its ancient rhythm, washing the city clean for whatever came next. Inside, surrounded by chosen family and supernatural grace, she held the future in her arms, a child who would never question whether she deserved love, never doubt that her gifts were meant for healing rather than harm. The new beginning stretched ahead like dawn, uncertain but luminous with possibility.